The dig site was cold and silent. Day One brushed dust from the metal surface, his forefingers moving carefully over the ancient seal. Above him, Earth's gray sky pressed down like a blanket of forgotten memories. The planet had been dead for 500 years, but its cities still stood like tombstones marking where humanity once lived. "I found something," Day One called out. His voice echoed across the ruins of what humans had called Soul. His team gathered around the excavation pit, their various alien forms creating strange shadows in the artificial lights. The object was a cylinder, 3 meters long and perfectly preserved. Unlike everything else they had found on Earth, this showed no signs of decay. Its surface was smooth and covered in symbols that seemed to shift when Day One looked at them directly. "It's a time capsule," said Jiwoo, the team's linguist. She was a Valerian like Day One, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that could see more colors than most species. The date marker says it was meant to be opened in the year 2500. That's their calendar system. "We're 500 years late," Day One said quietly. He felt something strange in his chest, an emotion his people rarely experienced. It might have been sadness. The humans had left this message for their future generations, never knowing their species would vanish completely. The team worked for 3 days to extract the capsule without damaging it. When they finally brought it to the research station, representatives from the Galactic Council arrived to witness the opening. This was significant. Earth was the greatest mystery in the galaxy, an advanced species that had simply disappeared within a single generation. Leaving behind empty cities and no bodies, Director Thalos led the council delegation. He was a Krell, tall and covered in crystalline scales that reflected light in rainbow patterns. His species had been part of the galaxy's government for 3,000 years. "Open it carefully," he instructed. "Whatever's inside belongs to the council now. Earth is under our protection." "Earth is dead," said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at Hyan Wu, a human from the Mars colony. He was short compared to most species in the room, with brown skin and black hair that fell across his eyes. "My ancestors left Earth before the disappearance. We have rights to anything found here." Thalos's scales darkened, a sign of irritation. "Your Mars colony has 3,000 people. You are not a recognized power in the galaxy. This discovery will be handled by the Council." Day One ignored the politics and focused on the capsule. Gi Wu had spent days decoding the opening mechanism. When she finally entered the correct sequence, the cylinder split down the middle with a soft hiss. Preserved air from 500 years ago spilled out, carrying the faint scent of plastic and metal. Inside were data storage devices, still functioning. The humans had built this capsule to last forever. Ku connected the first device to the translation computer. Everyone waited in silence as the system processed the information. "Loading," Giwu said. Her voice was tight with excitement. This could be everything: their history, their culture, their art. The screen flickered and displayed the first file. It was not art, it was a schematic. A weapon design so complex that the computer needed several minutes to render the full image. "What is that?" Talos asked. Jiwoo's fingers moved across the controls, opening more files. Each one was the same. Weapon designs. Thousands of them. Technologies the galaxy had never seen. Devices that seemed to break the known laws of physics. "I don't understand," Day One said. "Why would they leave this? Where are their poems, their music, their stories?" Hyeonwoo pushed forward and looked at the screen. His face went pale. "These aren't just weapons. Look at the classification marks. These are final stage designs, tested and functional." One schematic showed something called a quantum-locked projectile. According to the notes, it existed in multiple trajectories at the same time, making it impossible to dodge. Another design depicted a dimensional shearing device that could tear holes between realities. A third was labeled simply "Causality Mine" with a warning that read, "Use only in absolute emergency. Effects may propagate backward in time." "This is dangerous knowledge," Thalos said. His scales had turned completely black, a Krell sign of fear. "Seal these files immediately. No one must see this." "Oh," Hyeonwoo said. "This is my heritage. My ancestors left this for a reason. Your ancestors left weapons that could destroy the galaxy, Thalos replied. The Council will take custody of these files. They will be classified at the highest level. Day One barely heard their argument. He was reading the text files attached to each weapon design. Every single one included a message, repeated in dozens of human languages. Jiwoo had already translated it to Galactic Standard. Only if they come, the message said. Just those 4 words over and over. Who? Day One asked. Only if who comes. No one had an answer. Jiwoo continued exploring the files, searching for context. She found personnel records, research notes, and manufacturing specifications. Everything pointed to a massive military program that had consumed Earth's resources in its final century. There's a time stamp on these files, Jiwoo said. They were sealed 50 years before humanity disappeared. This wasn't random. They planned this. Hyeon-woo leaned over her shoulder, reading the data. My grandmother told me stories. She said the last messages from Earth were strange. People talking about leaving gifts for the future. No one understood what it meant. Thalos ordered his guards to confiscate all the data storage devices. Hyeon-woo protested, but he had no authority here. The council team packed everything carefully and prepared to transport it. To their main research facility, Daewon watched them work. Something felt wrong about all of this. Humanity had been a peaceful species, according to all the records. They had never started wars with their neighbors. Their final broadcast had been filled with hope and love, not fear. So why had they buried weapons instead of culture? That night, while the council team slept, Daewon returned to the lab. He was not a criminal by nature, but his curiosity was stronger than his respect for rules. He copied the files onto a personal storage device. Working quickly in the dark, as he finished, Giwoo stepped out of the shadows. I did the same thing, she said, showing him her own copy. Something is wrong here. We need to understand what the humans were afraid of. Hyeon-woo emerged from another corner. He was holding a data chip. I took one before Thalos arrived. I'm going back to Mars to study it. The 3 of them stood in the dark lab, each holding pieces of humanity's last secret. Above them, Earth's dead sky held no answers. But somewhere in those files was a truth that had been buried for 500 years. A truth that began with a warning, only if they come. Ku could not sleep. The weapon schematics filled her dreams with images of destruction and mathematics she barely understood. 3 weeks had passed since the capsule opening, and the Galactic Council had sealed all the files away. But she still had her copy hidden in her personal quarters. She contacted Daewon through an encrypted channel. I need to go back to Earth. There must be more capsules. One burial site doesn't make sense. Daewon agreed immediately. He had been thinking the same thing. They requested permission for a follow-up expedition, claiming they wanted to study human architecture. The council approved it without much interest. Earth was considered fully explored. What more could they find? Hyeon-woo joined them when their ship landed in what had been Tokyo. He had traveled from Mars without telling anyone. I studied the files, he said. The weapons all share a common design philosophy. They're meant to fight something specific, something the humans expected to encounter. They split up and searched different human cities. In every major population center, they found the same thing. Time capsules buried deep, all containing weapon designs. No art, no music, no literature, just instructions for building instruments of war. This was coordinated, Giwoo said, as they gathered in Beijing. Every human city did this at the same time. They must have had a reason. Daewon pulled up a map of their findings. I noticed something else. All the capsules are marked with coordinates. They're pointing to something. The coordinates led them to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The water had risen since humanity's time. Their scanners detected a structure far below the surface. It was massive, built into the ocean floor itself. Getting down there required special equipment. It took them 2 weeks to prepare. When they finally descended in a reinforced submarine, they found a facility that still had power after 500 years. The entrance recognized Hyeon-woo's DNA and opened for him. Inside was a quantum storage system, the kind that could preserve data forever. The facility's computer activated when they entered, and a hologram appeared. It showed a human woman in a white coat with tired eyes and gray hair. "If you're watching this, it means humanity is gone," the hologram said. "My name is Sunhee. I led the weapons development program. I need you to understand why we did this." The hologram gestured, and images filled the air around them. Star charts, radio signals, and mathematical equations that made GU's head hurt. 150 years ago, we detected something at the edge of the galaxy, Sunhee continued. A signal. It was mathematical, precise, and cold. Our best linguists spent 30 years decoding it. The message was simple: compliance or elimination. The star chart showed a path cutting through the galaxy from galactic north. Along that path, red markers indicated dead systems. Dozens of them. They intercepted more transmissions over the years. They came from a species we called the Priors. They claimed to have seeded the galaxy with life millions of years ago. Now, they've returned to judge their creations. Any species they consider unsuitable is erased. Not conquered. Not enslaved. Simply removed from existence. Hyenwoo's hands were shaking. The galaxy has been peaceful for 3,000 years. Why didn't anyone else see this? The hologram seemed to anticipate the question. The Priors move slowly. They take their time with each system. We calculated their rate of advance. They would reach Earth in approximately 600 years. We tried to warn the other species, but no one believed us. We were a young species. No one took our fears seriously. More images appeared. Human scientists working frantically in laboratories, massive construction projects. Resources being diverted from everything else. We realized we wouldn't survive long enough to fight them ourselves, Sunhee said. Her holographic face showed deep sadness. Something was happening to us. Our birth rates dropped. Children stopped being born. Within 50 years, we knew humanity would be extinct. Giwu felt cold despite the warm submarine. What caused it? We never found out. Some thought it was a disease. Others believed that Priors had already begun their work, eliminating us in a way we couldn't detect. But we didn't have time to search for answers. We had to use our last years to create something that could help whoever came after us. The hologram walked through the weapons schematics, explaining each one. We designed these weapons to fight beings with technology millions of years advanced. Each design pushes physics to its absolute limit. We tested everything. We made sure it all worked. Then we buried the knowledge for you to find. But why weapons? Day One asked the empty air. Why not warn the council? Why not leave messages explaining everything? Sunny's hologram smiled sadly. We tried. We sent messages to every species we knew. No one listened. The galaxy was at peace. War was considered ancient history. Our warnings were dismissed as paranoia from a dying species. So we left you something you couldn't ignore. Weapons powerful enough that you would have to pay attention. The hologram began to fade. The Priors are coming. By our calculations, they should reach Council space in about 100 years from when we sealed this facility. Maybe less, maybe more, but they are coming. And now you know. The facility's computer displayed one final file. It contained all of humanity's research on the Priors. Radio intercepts, trajectory calculations, and analysis of the dead systems they had left behind. The data was undeniable. Hyenwu sat down heavily on the floor. We're running out of time. If the humans calculated correctly, the Priors could be close already. Jiwoo checked the facility's chronometer against current galactic dates. Her skin went pale blue, almost white. The humans sealed this 500 years ago. They predicted the Priors would arrive in 600 years. That means we have 100 years left. We have to tell the council, Day One said. They copied all the data and returned to the surface. The trip back to council space took 3 days. During that time, they reviewed everything Sunhee had left behind. The humans had been thorough. They had documented everything they learned about the Priors. The Priors didn't use ships in any conventional sense. They existed partially in higher dimensions. Their technology could manipulate reality itself. They had destroyed hundreds of species over millions of years, always following the same pattern. A warning signal, a period of judgment, and then complete erasure. When they reached the council headquarters, Talos refused to see them at first. They had to request an emergency session and present their evidence publicly. The council chamber, filled with representatives from 40 different species, is all curious about what could be so urgent. Daewon presented the data. He showed them Sun He's message, the intercepted signals, and the calculations. He explained everything as clearly as he could. The chamber fell silent when he finished. Then Thalos stood up, his scales shifting through colors that indicated complex emotions. "This is interesting historical data," he said carefully. "But it changes nothing. The galaxy has been at peace for 3,000 years. We have seen no evidence of these priors, because they haven't arrived yet," Hyenwu said, his voice rising. "The humans died trying to warn you. Are you going to ignore them again?" Thalos's scales turned red with anger. The humans were a paranoid species facing extinction. They created an enemy that didn't exist to make their death meaningful. I will not throw away 3,000 years of peace because of ghost stories. Other council members began to argue. Some believed the data. Others dismissed it. The chamber descended into chaos. Jiwoo stood and called for silence. "I propose we verify the data. Send long-range observers to the coordinates where the priors should be. If they're coming, we'll see them. If they're not, we'll know the humans were wrong." Talos considered this. "Very well. We'll send observation teams. But until we have confirmation, this matter is closed. No one is to build these weapons. Is that understood?" They agreed, but Daewon knew it was a mistake. By the time they confirmed the priors were coming, it might be too late to prepare. He looked at Jiwoo and Hyenwu. They were thinking the same thing. Humanity had left them a gift. A terrible gift, but one born from love and sacrifice. The question was whether anyone would be brave enough to use it. 6 months passed before the observation teams returned. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every major species when they presented their findings. Daewon sat in the front row, his heart's beating fast in his chest. The lead observer was a Krell named Velkan. His scales were pure white, drained of color. "We found them," he said simply. "At the edge of the galaxy, exactly where the human data predicted. They are real. The priors are real." The chamber erupted in noise. Species that had never known fear began to panic. The priors had already entered the galaxy, moving through uninhabited systems. But they were ahead of schedule. Instead of 100 years. The observation team calculated they would reach populated space in 50 years. Thalos stood at his podium, trying to restore order. His scales were dark gray, a color Daewon had never seen on him before. "We must remain calm. We have time to prepare. We will increase our defense fleet and what?" Hyenwu interrupted from the gallery. "Shoot them with conventional weapons? The human data shows that doesn't work. They exist in dimensions we can't even perceive." The council fell into 2 groups over the following weeks. Thalos led the faction that wanted to preserve peace. They argued that building weapons would make them no better than the priors. They should try to communicate, to negotiate. To find a peaceful solution, Hyenwu led the other faction, those who wanted to prepare for war. They studied the human weapon schematics and argued that humanity had given them the only chance at survival. To ignore that gift would be suicide. Gu found herself caught in the middle. She understood both sides. Peace was precious. The galaxy had finally achieved harmony after millions of years of conflict. But what good was peace if everyone died? She spent her days analyzing the quantum storage facility's data. Deep in the archives, she found something that changed everything. A personal log from Sun He, recorded in her final days. "I know what we're leaving behind is terrible," Sun He said in the log. Her face was thin, aged beyond her years. Weapons that could destroy worlds. Knowledge that could restart the arms race that nearly killed our ancestors. We debated this for years. Some said we should destroy everything, die quietly, and let the galaxy find its own way. Sun He coughed and took a moment to recover. But we couldn't do that. We loved the galaxy too much. We had met the Valerians and the Krell and the dozens of other species. We had seen their art, learned their languages, shared their food. The thought of the priors erasing all of that was unbearable. The recording showed Sun He in a laboratory, working on a final modification to the weapon designs. So we made a choice. We built in a safeguard. Every weapon requires human neural patterns to activate. Not just any human DNA, but the specific brain structure that makes humans human. Our creativity, our stubbornness, our refusal to accept the impossible. Giwu's eyes widened as she understood. We made ourselves the key, Sun He continued. If the priors come, and you need these weapons, you'll have to bring us back. Clone us from the genetic samples we left behind. Raise us. Teach us. And if you do all that, if you care enough about us to resurrect our species, then you'll deserve the legacy we left behind. Jiwu brought this discovery to the council immediately. The revelation changed everything. They couldn't just build the weapons. They needed humans to operate them. This is insane, Talos said. They want us to create a warrior species? We would be building soldiers, nothing more. Or, Daewon said quietly, we would be bringing back a species that loved the galaxy enough to die protecting it. The debate raged for weeks. Meanwhile, the long-range observers sent back worse news. The priors had reached the outer colonies. 2 primitive species had been encountered. The priors had sent them the compliance message. Both species had refused. Within 48 hours, both species ceased to exist. Their planets remained, but every living thing on them had been reduced to component atoms. The priors didn't use bombs or weapons. They simply appeared in orbit and emitted a frequency. Everything that was alive stopped being alive. The galaxy watched in horror. The Council's conventional defense fleet tried to engage the priors. Their ships passed through the prior vessels as if shooting at ghosts. Nothing worked. Missiles, lasers, kinetic weapons, all useless. We're out of time, Hyanwu said at an emergency council session. We need to authorize the resurrection program now. Thalos looked at the casualty reports. 2 species, billions of individuals, gone. He had spent his entire life believing in peace. But peace meant nothing if everyone was dead. Very well, he said, his voice heavy. Begin the program. But slowly. We'll resurrect a small number first. We need to ensure they're raised properly, taught our values as well as their own history. The genetics team worked with the samples from Earth. They had enough DNA to create thousands of humans. But the Council limited them to 100 for the first generation. The clones were grown in accelerated chambers. Aging from infant to adult in just 2 years, Jiwu volunteered to help raise them. Daewon did as well. They felt responsible somehow, having been the ones to discover the time capsules. If they were going to bring back humanity, they would do it right. The first human to emerge from the growth chamber was a young woman. Her genetic template matched Sun He's profile. They named her Taeyang, which meant sun in one of the old Earth languages. Taeyang looked around the facility with wide eyes. She had been given accelerated education during her growth, but nothing could prepare someone for actually existing. Where are we? She asked in perfect galactic standard. You're on Council Station 7, Jiwu said gently. Welcome back to life. Over the next months, 99 more humans emerged. They were diverse, pulled from genetic samples across old Earth. They had been given education about both human history and the current galaxy. They knew why they existed. Taeyang became their natural leader. She was brilliant, processing complex mathematics that made even Valerian scientists struggle. But she was also kind, spending her free time learning about the species that had brought her into existence. Hanwu trained them in the philosophy behind the weapons. He had spent years studying Sun He's notes. Your ancestors didn't just build weapons, he told them. They tried to understand how the priors think. Every design contains encoded philosophy. To use these weapons, you need to think in ways the galaxy has never thought before. The weapons required more than just activation. They needed synchronization between human consciousness and alien physics. Taeyang and her team spent months learning, failing, trying again. Some weapons worked on the first try. Others failed catastrophically. One test nearly opened a hole in space-time that would have swallowed the station. They learned to be more careful. The priors continued their advance. They were systematic, methodical, testing each species they encountered. Some chose compliance, surrendering their independence to become servants of the priors. Most refused and were eliminated. Teche watched the reports with growing urgency. We need to accelerate the program. At this rate, the priors will reach council space before we're ready. The council authorized the creation of 900 more humans. The second generation grew faster, learning from the first. Within a year, there were 1,000 humans working on the weapon systems. They built the devices in secret, on a station far from any populated world. The quantum-locked projectiles took months to construct. The dimensional shearing device required resources from 12 different star systems. The causality mines were so dangerous that they had to be assembled by remote drones. Taeyang discovered something as they worked. Sunhee's designs weren't just weapons. They were keys to understanding reality itself. Each schematic contained hidden layers of information, showing how the priors perceive the universe. They think in 4 dimensions, Taeyang explained to the council. To them, time is just another direction they can move through. That's why our weapons don't work. We're shooting at ghosts that exist slightly outside our timeline, and your ancestors' weapons? Thalos asked. They force the priors into our dimension. They don't destroy them directly. They make them vulnerable to conventional physics. Then we can fight them. 6 months before the priors would reach the core council worlds, Taeyang declared the weapons ready. They had built enough to equip a fleet of 300 ships. It wasn't many, but it would have to be enough. The night before they departed, Daewon found Taeyang standing alone, looking at a hologram of old Earth. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. But Sunhee was afraid too. She did it anyway. That's what it means to be human, I think. Being afraid and doing what's necessary anyway. She turned to face him. "If we fail, if the priors win, I want you to know something. Being alive, even for just a few years, was worth it. Thank you for bringing us back." Daewon didn't know what to say. He settled for the truth. "Thank you for being willing to fight for a galaxy you barely know." The fleet launched at dawn. The fleet gathered at the threshold, a region of space where the fabric of reality grew thin. Stars looked strange here, their light bending through dimensions that normal eyes couldn't perceive. This was where the Council's defense forces had chosen to make their stand. Taeyang stood on the bridge of the flagship Last Hope, a name she found both appropriate and depressing. Around her, the crew worked in tense silence. Half were humans like herself. The other half were volunteers from various species who had trained to work alongside them. Day-1 commanded the science vessel positioned at the fleet's center. Giwu operated the dimensional shearing device from there, her 4 fingers dancing across controls designed for human hands. She had practiced for months to make it work. Hyun-Woo, now old and gray, insisted on flying a fighter. "I'm the last of the original humans," he had said, when they tried to stop him. "If this is where humanity ends, I should be here to see it." Thalos commanded the Council's conventional fleet, positioned behind the human ships. His scales had turned a deep purple, a color that meant determination mixed with resignation. He had spent his life believing in peace. But he was willing to fight for that peace one final time. The priors arrived without warning. One moment the space ahead was empty. The next structures appeared that hurt to look at. They were massive, impossibly huge. Their geometry existing in more dimensions than the 3-dimensional beings could fully comprehend. "I count 37 vessels," reported the sensor officer. Her hands were shaking. "No, 42. They keep phasing in and out of perception." Priors broadcast their message on all frequencies. It wasn't sound or language in any traditional sense. It was pure mathematics, translated into meaning directly in the minds of everyone who received it. "You have been found dissonant. You will be corrected." Taeyang activated the fleet-wide communication. "All ships, this is Last Hope. Remember your training. Don't try to think in 3 dimensions. The priors exist everywhere and everyone. We have to think the same way. On my mark, activate causality mines. 20 ships launched the mines simultaneously. They didn't explode in space. They exploded in time, creating bubbles where cause and effect became untangled. Inside those bubbles, the prior's actions had no causes. It's making their effects impossible. The nearest prior construct flickered and vanished, its existence becoming uncertain. The others adapted immediately, shifting their timeline position to avoid the affected areas. They're learning, Daewon called out from his ship. We won't surprise them twice with the same trick. Hyenwu led a fighter squadron armed with quantum-locked projectiles. These weapons existed in multiple trajectories simultaneously, hitting their targets in every possible path through space-time. The fighters dove toward a prior vessel, their weapons firing streams of particles that were and weren't there at the same time. The projectiles passed through the prior shields as if they didn't exist. Because in many timelines, they didn't. The prior vessel shuddered as the particles forced it partially into 3-dimensional space. It's working, Hyenwu shouted over the communication channel. Keep firing. But the priors were not passive. They responded by emitting their dissolution frequency, the same force that had destroyed entire species. The waves spread outward, invisible but deadly. 3 council ships caught in the wave simply stopped existing. Their molecules came apart, their atoms separated, their energy dispersed into space. The crews didn't have time to scream. Dimensional shearing device ready, Giwu called out. Her voice was calm despite the chaos around her. She had trained for this moment. She activated the device. Reality tore. That was the only way to describe it. A rift opened in space, a wound in the fabric of dimensions. The rift cut through a prior vessel, forcing it completely into normal space where physics behaved predictably. The Council's conventional weapons opened fire on the exposed. Prior, lasers and missiles that had passed harmlessly through the vessels before now struck with full force. The prior construct broke apart, its impossible geometry collapsing into simple 3-dimensional wreckage. First confirmed kill, Thalos reported. His voice carried shock. It's actually possible to fight them. But the victory was brief. The priors adapted again. They changed their frequency, making the dissolution wave stronger. 4 more ships vanished, and 6. The fleet was being torn apart. Taeyang watched the tactical display with growing desperation. They were losing. The priors were too adaptable, too powerful. For every minor victory, they suffered major losses. We need the final weapon, said Ki-1, her second-in-command. He was a human from the 2nd generation, grown in the same facility as Taeyang. Sun He's incomplete design. Taeyang had hoped to avoid this. The final weapon wasn't documented in the same way as the others. It existed as fragments, hints, mathematical possibilities scattered throughout Sunny's notes. Taeyang had spent months trying to understand it. It wasn't a device. It was a message, a broadcast encoded into the quantum structure of human consciousness itself. If I do this, Taejong said, I don't know what will happen. The weapon uses my mind as a transmitter. It might kill me. Then I'll do it, Ki-1 said immediately. Or any of us. We all volunteered for this. Taeyang shook her head. No. Sunhee designed it for her genetic template. It has to be me. Another wave of dissolution spread through the fleet. Hyenwu's fighter was caught at the edge. His ship's shields held for a moment, then began to fail. This is Hyenwu, he said calmly. It's been an honor. Tell my people on Mars that I remembered Earth until the end. His ship disappeared in a flash of dissociated particles. Tej felt something break inside her chest. Hyenwu had been kind to her, patient when she struggled to understand her own heritage. He had been the last link to humanity's original timeline, and now he was gone. Prepare to ram the nearest prior construct, she ordered. Get me close enough to broadcast. That's suicide, Ki-1 protested. Yes, Taeyang agreed. But so is everything else we're doing. At least this way, it means something. Daewon's voice came over the communication channel. Taeyang, don't do this. We'll find another way. There is no other way, she replied. Sun-Hee knew this weapon would cost everything. That's why she left it incomplete. She wanted whoever used it to make a conscious choice.
Oh.
She initiated the broadcast sequence. The device connected directly to her neural implants, drawing power from her thoughts, her memories, her entire sense of self. If I don't survive, make sure they remember. Not just me, but Sun-Hee and all the original humans. They died trying to save people they never met. That should mean something. It does, Ju said, her voice breaking. It means everything. The last hope accelerated toward the largest prior construct. Shields failed. Hull plating burned away. But the ship kept moving, carrying its cargo of human consciousness toward an enemy that had existed for millions of years. The priors targeted the last hope with everything they had. The dissolution frequency intensified. But Taeyang was already broadcasting, her mind opened wide. Every thought and memory becoming signal. The message wasn't words. It was experience. It was the feeling of Sun-Hee working in her laboratory, knowing she would die but choosing to hope anyway. It was Han-Wu learning about his ancestors, carrying their memory across 500 years. It was Taeyang herself, brought back from extinction, given life. And choosing to use that life to protect others, the message was defiance. Not aggressive or angry, but quiet and absolute. It said, "We refuse your judgment. We choose to grow, to make mistakes, to be beautifully imperfect." That is not dissonance. That is life. The quantum structure of the broadcast acted like a virus in the prior's deterministic systems. They had existed for millions of years, following perfect logic, eliminating chaos wherever they found it. But this message introduced something they had never encountered, the assertion that imperfection had value. The prior constructs hesitated. For the first time in recorded history, they stopped their attack. Taejong felt her consciousness spreading across dimensions. She could perceive the priors now, truly see them. They were ancient and lonely, following programming older than most stars. They had forgotten why they judged species. They only knew that they must. What if you didn't have to? Taeyong's message asked them, what if you could just watch? Just observe? Let us grow and fail and learn? Would that be so terrible? The priors didn't answer, but they withdrew, pulling back into higher dimensions. Their massive constructs fading from three-dimensional space. On the last Hope's bridge, Taeyong collapsed. Her neural implants had burned out, overwhelmed by the power of the broadcast. Ki-won caught her before she hit the floor. Is she alive? Daewon's voice came over the channel. Desperate Ki-won checked her vital signs. Barely. But yes, she's alive. The fleet held position, waiting to see if the priors would return. Hours passed, then days. But the priors were gone. Retreating to the edge of the galaxy to contemplate what they had experienced, Thalos broadcast to all surviving ships. Stand down. I think we won. But as the crew celebrated, Ji-woo looked at the casualty reports and wondered if it could really be called victory. They had lost hundreds of ships, thousands of crew members. The galaxy did not return to normal. How could it? Everyone had seen the priors. They had watched entire species vanish in seconds. They had witnessed the impossible become real. The universe felt different now, smaller and more fragile than before. Taeyang spent 3 months, recovering in the medical facility on Council Station 7. Her neural implants had to be completely replaced. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive. She didn't feel lucky. She felt tired and sad and older than her few years should allow. Visitors came constantly. Representatives from dozens of species wanted to thank her personally. She accepted their gratitude with grace, but inside she was hollow. Hyen was death haunted her. He had been the last connection to Earth's original timeline, and she had let him die. Daewon visited her every day. He brought her books from different worlds, thinking she might enjoy learning about the galaxy she had saved. Mostly, they sat in comfortable silence. Words felt inadequate for what they had experienced. The council is debating what to do with the weapons, Daewon said one afternoon. Dalos wants them destroyed. He says we proved we can survive without becoming a warrior culture. Taeyang looked out the window at the stars. What do you think we should do? I don't know, Daewon admitted. Part of me agrees with Thalos. We've seen what those weapons can do. They're terrifying. But another part remembers how helpless we felt when the priors first arrived. If they come back, we need to be ready. They'll come back, Taeyang said quietly. Maybe not soon. Maybe not for 1,000 years. But they're still out there, thinking about what I showed them. One day they'll decide they don't like the answer. The council session to decide the weapon's fate was held 2 weeks later. The chamber was packed. This decision would shape the galaxy's future. Talos spoke first. We have maintained peace for 3,000 years by refusing to build weapons of mass destruction. These human devices are exactly that. If we keep them, we become the thing we fought against. I propose we dismantle every weapon and bury the knowledge forever. Representatives from the outer colonies objected immediately. They had seen the priors up close. Their worlds had been minutes away from dissolution. Easy for you to say, shouted a Valerian diplomat. Your homeworld wasn't threatened. Ours was. We want the protection these weapons offer. The debate raged for hours. Some species wanted the weapons under council control. Others wanted them distributed equally. A few wanted to expand the arsenal, building more weapons just in case. Taeyang finally stood to speak. The chamber fell silent. She had earned the right to be heard. I understand everyone's fear, she began. I'm afraid too. But I've thought about what Sun He would want. She didn't build these weapons because she loved war. She built them because she loved the galaxy. She wanted you to survive. Taejong walked to the center of the chamber. Here's what I propose. We dismantle the weapons. All of them. We bury the knowledge again, just like humanity did 500 years ago. But we do it right this time. What does that mean? Dalos asked. It means we'd bury the schematics with context. With history? With everything we learned, so that if the priors return, whoever finds them will understand not just how to build weapons, but why they were built. And more importantly, what they cost. Jiwoo stood as well. I support this. We should also create a monitoring network at the galaxy's edge. Early warning systems. That way we'll have more time to prepare if they return. Council voted. It was close, but Taeyong's proposal won. Over the next year, the weapons were carefully dismantled. The schematics were sealed in new time capsules, buried across multiple worlds. But this time, they included personal messages from the survivors. Stories of the battle. Records of those who died. Everything that made the weapons more than just tools of destruction. The council also voted on another proposal. Earth should be returned to humanity. The 1,000 humans who had been resurrected deserved a homeworld. Taeyang accepted on behalf of her people, though the idea terrified her. She had never been to Earth. None of the new humans had. It was a planet of ghosts and memories. The journey to Earth took 2 weeks. Taeyang brought 50 volunteers, including Kiwon and several other humans from the first generation. Daewon and Jiwoo insisted on coming too. We started this journey together, Jiwoo said. We should see it through together. Earth looked different than the records showed. 500 years of abandonment had let nature reclaim most cities. Trees grew through buildings. Vines covered roads. But it was beautiful in its wildness, green and alive in ways the dead planet had never been when they first arrived. They landed in what had been Seoul, near where Daewon had found the first time capsule. The dig site was still there, preserved as a historical location. Taeyang stood at the edge of the pit and looked down at the empty space where humanity's message had waited for centuries. This is where it started, Daewon said. No, Taeyang replied. It started 500 years ago, with Sun He and the others. We're just continuing their work. They explored the city over the following days. Most buildings were too damaged to enter safely, but some structures had survived. They found a library with books still on the shelves, their pages yellowed but readable. They found a school with children's drawings on the walls. Faded but still visible, Key-1 discovered a memorial in the center of the city. It had been built shortly before humanity disappeared. The names of the weapons program scientists were carved into stone. Sunny's name was at the top. Beneath the names was an inscription in multiple languages. G-Wu translated it. "We prepared for war so our children could know peace." Taeyang traced Sun He's name with her fingers. She felt a connection to this woman she had never met, this ancestor who had given her life meaning even before she existed. "We're going to rebuild here," Taeyang announced. "Not just us, but anyone who wants to come. We'll make Earth a place of learning, a memorial to what happened and a hope for what could be," the other humans agreed. Over the next months, more volunteers arrived from across the galaxy. 1,000 resurrected humans were joined by Valerians Krell and dozens of other species. They cleared the overgrown cities carefully, preserving what could be saved. Removing what was too damaged, they built new structures around the old ones, creating a city that blended ancient human architecture with modern galactic design. They established universities, research centers, and museums. Earth became a place where anyone could come to learn about humanity, the priors. And the price of survival, G-Wu, became the director of the Earth Archives, overseeing the collection of human history and the storage of the new time capsules. She worked with historians from 100 worlds to ensure the story was told completely and honestly. Daewon returned to archaeological work, but now he focused on preserving human sites rather than excavating them. He trained new archaeologists in the importance of respecting the past while learning from it. Thalos visited Earth on the anniversary of the battle. He was older now, his scales showing patterns that indicated deep age. He walked through the memorial garden where the names of all those who died fighting the priors were recorded. "I was wrong," he told Taeyang. "I thought peace meant never preparing for war. But real peace means being willing to fight for it when necessary. Your ancestors understood that. I'm sorry it took me so long to learn." "You learned," Taeyang said. "That's what matters." She had grown into her role as humanity's representative. The scared young woman who had woken in a growth chamber was gone, replaced by someone confident and purposeful. She still missed Heianwu. She still had nightmares about the battle. But she had also found reasons to hope. The monitoring network at the galaxy's edge remained active, watching for any sign of the prior's return. So far, there had been nothing. But the galaxy remained vigilant. They had learned not to assume peace was permanent. 5 years after the battle, Taeyang stood on a hill overlooking New Seoul. The city glowed with lights from 1,000 different species, all living together, learning from each other. In the distance, she could see the memorial where Sun He's name was carved. Kiwon joined her on the hill. "Do you think we did enough?" he asked. "Do you think Sun He would be proud?" Taeyang considered the question seriously. "I think she'd be amazed we're here at all." Her plan worked. Humanity survived, even if not in the way she expected. And we helped save the galaxy. At a cost, Kiwon reminded her. "Yes," Taeyang agreed. "Everything worth doing costs something. But look at what we gained." She gestured to the city below. "We have a home. We have friends from 100 worlds. We have a future. Sun He gave us that. All of humanity gave us that."
Ow.
They stood in silence for a while, watching the city lights. Somewhere in the archives, Jiwoo was cataloging the day's discoveries. Somewhere in the memorial garden, visitors from distant worlds were reading the names of those who died. Somewhere in orbit, the monitoring satellites kept their eternal watch, and on the hill, 2 humans looked at the stars and remembered that they existed because someone 500 years ago had refused to give up hope. "The new time capsules are ready," Kiwon said. "The council approved the final designs. If the priors return in another 500 years, whoever's here will find everything they need."